Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 115 of the Observer's Notebook podcast, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the podcast, and also the coordinator of the training program within the Alpo. Thank you for downloading and listening. The ALPO collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomenon, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, otherwise known as the Strolling Astronomer. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. If you enjoy what you hear on the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon by giving as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. And for $10 a month, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast. You can help us out by going to www.patreon.com/Observer's Notebook. And if you'd like to join the Alpo, you can for as little as $18 a year. For more information, find us on the internet at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And yes, we are also on the Facebook. Let's search for ALPO Astronomy. And also this here podcast has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy, please, what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss another episode of the Observer's Notebook. And now, episode 115 with editor of the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, Ken Poshedly. Hope you enjoy. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Observer's Notebook podcast. Today we have a return visitor to the guest, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, Ken Poshedly. Welcome back, Ken.
Glad to be here.
Great. Now, before we get into the topic today, which is going to be the journal and a few other things, why don't you just give everybody a little bit of background about yourself?
Okay, I got interested in astronomy, what we used to call space. When I was a kid around 10, 11, 12 years old in the early 60s. So I'm old. I saw the Beatles play live in Cleveland in 1966, my hometown. But anyway, got interested in astronomy at that time. For one thing, because I recall an elementary school teacher, I'm not sure if it was a fifth grade teacher, hand copying onto the blackboard. Remember those blackboards with white chalk? A drawing of the moon with all of the seas and the Maria and the craters.
Wow.
He could on a blackboard, and she had a paper in her hand, and she was just kind of duplicating it. And I was just totally mesmerized by that. You know, we've all seen the moon, but I was just really, really interested in what she was doing. And then also, being from Cleveland, I remember my mom and dad, they knew I liked space and astronomy. And they took me to what we now call, I guess, a sidewalk astronomy event. Mm. One of the Cleveland clubs, there are two of them, I found out now. But it had an event in one of the suburbs in an open field. Any of you people who live in around Cleveland, this was up in off of Warrensville Center Road. But I remember there being refractors. Now, this is about 1961, 62, 63. And just like many, many people, what got them really into it was seeing Saturn. Mm. And I recall looking through a refractor and seeing Saturn, and I thought, this is really cool. So that's how I really got into it, and I made my mind up I wanted to go into astronomy as a career. It didn't work out in the long run because mathematics and me didn't really get along. I never flunked it, but it was just really, really tough. I found that out in high school that it'd be better if I chose something else, and I wound up going into journalism and did that for a number of years and segued into technical writing many years later. And but I kept my interest in astronomy as sort of like, oh, I wish I could have, but it's better that I didn't. And then around 1989, I rediscovered it as a hobby. And about a year or two later, I purchased a used Criterion telescope from a friend who had passed away from his estate.
Was that the old RV6?
The old RV6.
Ah, yeah, I had one of those.
Yeah. And got to be a real expert on it, but of course, I'm usually a day late and a dollar short. That's what happens when I join clubs and so forth. And it wasn't until after I bought that that I found out that Criterion had long gone. It was purchased by Bausch and Lomb 6 or 7 years earlier. And there's another long story to that. But anyway, I kept it for many years, got to be a real expert on it, and kept it going. And that's how I got really, my interest in astronomy, and it stayed.
Now you said you're from Cleveland, or outskirts of Cleveland? Cleveland.
I was born on the near west side of Cleveland in what's called the Tremont area. My mom and dad are originally from the very rural part of Pennsylvania, Clearfield County. They were farmers and that, and moved to Cleveland for my dad's factory job. I was born 9 years after they moved to Cleveland, so I was born and raised there and proud of it. And then lived on the east side of Cleveland near John Adams High School, my first 21 years, and then we moved to what's called the Old Brooklyn section of Cleveland. And then after college, I wound up moving into Lakewood and then moved down here to Atlanta in 1984. But yeah, Cleveland, I just never really cut the strings. It's a great, great city, and that's just the way it is.
Great football team.
This year.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
So being from Cleveland, was it a dark sky area, or were you pretty limited to just the moon and planets?
I always was. I didn't know when I was really young that you could differentiate between deep sky observers and lunar and planetary observers. I just looked at the sky. I got to know the constellations pretty well, living in the city, but not in downtown, but in a residential area.
Okay.
I guess my limiting magnitude, looking back on it now, is probably magnitude 3 or 4, something like that. And, we had streetlights and stuff, but I mean, the moon and planets, I mean, let's face it, it's got to be pretty bad if you can't see the moon from where you are. But, I just made, you make do with what you have. And, my father was a factory worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And we had a roof over our head and food on the table. So we didn't have a lot of luxuries and things to do this and to do that. But, I did some observing. I was given a 1-inch Tasco tabletop refractor for my first telescope, which I still have.
Oh, my.
I was so proud of that. And, the eyepiece that's on it is the eyepiece that's on it. And then some years later, probably 1964 or so, an uncle of mine he made a refractor telescope for me with a drain pipe and some optics from, I forgot the name of the science company.
Probably Edmund or something?
It wasn't Edmund, but it was something similar.
Okay.
Anyway, and I had a tripod, a real homemade broomstick tripod that he put together. I mean, he really did that for me. I still have it, but not used.
Yeah.
And it was basically looking at the moon and Venus, what there is to see of it, Jupiter and Saturn. Basically, that's all I could do from where I was.
So how did you discover the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers?
Going back to the early 60s, at the public library, the Cleveland Public Library, one of the branches, there was a book that I borrowed And if I remember correctly, I might be wrong, but it was in the children's room, and it was called Sky Observer's Guide.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the cover, but it was a children's book, but it wasn't cartoons, but it was the children's type, but it was astronomy.
It's a pocketbook, basically.
No, it was a little larger than a pocket book, but it wasn't a full-size, children's giant book. It wasn't like the big book of this or that, something in between. And in the back of that book were a series of a listing of what you would probably call now other sources or other things, And there was a listing for the Alpo and a listing for the AA VSO, if I remember correctly. So this had to be 1962. So I wrote a letter to Walter Haas, founder and executive director, and he wrote back to me. And I don't know where I got the money because we didn't have a checking account. I forgot what the dues were, but one way or the other, I joined the Alpo, and I stayed with it until about 1965, 66. I was really mesmerized by the beautiful, beautiful drawings and sketch work by people like Clark Chapman and so forth. But, the trigonometric or the calculus or whatever you call those equations that were in there, just, I thought, oh, no. So I dropped out. And then that was about 65, 66. And then, as I said, about 1990, I rediscovered the association and rejoined. And it was like meeting an old brother or a friend that you hadn't seen for many, many years. I discovered there were so many changes in telescopes and interests and everything. But that's how I found out about the Alpo, was through the back of a book in the public library.
Okay. Now, have you ever contributed to any of the sections observing?
In a general way, I would talk with this or that coordinator and mention that I had seen this or seen that. But when I joined, electronic imaging was still a thing for the professionals. So my only contributions at the time when I rejoined were probably a written paragraph or two here and there. That's all I could do.
Okay. All right. Well, in your life in astronomy, who do you think has influenced you the most?
You don't know who you influence yourself or anybody until many years later. There was one gentleman that influenced me. He's passed away now, but in the early 60s, my dad used to take me to the Cleveland Planetarium, which was part of the Cleveland Natural History Museum. And the guy who did the shows, and this is before the the taped canned shows, he did live shows. His name was Dan Snow. And he did live shows, and they didn't have laser pointers. He had some kind of a pointer, I guess. But I would go back week after week. My dad would take me week after week. And let's face it, it was the same show for the whole month. And I didn't care, So Dan Snow really got my enthusiasm going. And I got to say that teacher that I mentioned earlier that I saw drawing maps of the moon probably did it as well. But those are the two who come to mind.
Okay. Now, do you have current observing equipment, current telescopes?
Yeah. I kept my RV6 up until only about 2 years ago or so, or 3 years ago. And I'm one of those people, when I sell something off, I don't want to sell it to somebody that's going to trash it after 6 or 7 months, no matter what it is.
Right.
And I let it be known on the, there's a Criterion, email list out there, and now it's on Facebook as well. And I let it be known that I was looking to sell the scope. And a guy out in, I forgot if it was Washington State or Oregon, he contacted me, and we came to an agreement. And we talked on the phone. He's pretty knowledgeable, and he already has an RV6, but he would like mine. So We agreed on a price, and I packaged it up and sent it off to him. And quite honestly, I didn't make a penny on it because all of the money that I was going to make on it went to shipping.
Oh, yeah.
So, but it was just as well that it went to a good home. And right after that, I purchased what you call new old stock Celestron AVX 8-inch Newtonian from the supply left by a guy here who had a really good camera and optics store in Metro Atlanta. The name of the place was Camera Bug. And the guy passed away unexpectedly from illness. And he had a lot of stuff in his inventory. So I purchased the Celestron 8-inch, and then I wound up getting an AVX mount through another astronomy friend here, Steve Siedentop, who is also in the Alpo and a big contributor to this podcast.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is, and he lives only a few minutes from me. He had a friend who was selling off his AVX mount. So one thing led to another. So I have an AVX mount with my AVX 8-inch Newtonian. And Steve himself was starting to kind of cull some of his supplies. And he sold off to me a Celestron 6-inch refractor, which is really the AVX refractor that would still go with it. So I have a 6-inch Celestron refractor, and I've got the 8-inch AVX Newtonian and the AVX mount. And I got a set of eyepieces that I bought from Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And I got one hell of a boatload of the crappiest weather for the last year.
Oh, my. Well, yeah. But it sounds like it's a nice group of telescopes that you have to choose from and to use.
Yeah.
Great. Now, you are the editor of, as I mentioned earlier, of the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Can you give us a little history of the magazine?
Well, to be a little more detailed about this, I am officially the Alpo is organized into what they call sections. It was founded by Walter Haas, I think, in 1947, and modeled against the British Astronomical Association, the BAA, and they are organized by interests, by sections, observing sections, as is the Alpo itself. And I break it down myself into interest sections, such as the online section and so forth, which you're a real big head of, as well as observing sections for the planets, the comets, meteors, and stuff like that. And I'm the publications manager or coordinator of I'm the coordinator of the publication section. Okay. And then by default, I became editor of the journal in 2001 when my predecessor, a fine man, Mr. John Westfall, decided to retire from it. He stayed in the organization for many years, passed away only about, I think, 2 years ago. And so with my background in journalism, publications editing, and technical writing, I was tasked with taking over the journal at that time. So I'm the editor and publisher. And then about a year or so ago, I contacted another gentleman, Shawn Dilles, who lives up near Washington, D.C. in Virginia. And he is really, I call him the editor.
Okay.
So I'm the publication section coordinator, and I continue to do the electronic layout of the journal, and I back up Shawn, and he is now the person who I have appointed to get the science papers and proofread them, and then he passes them along to me. So if any of the listeners have background in publications editing, I would like to talk with you because I've been doing this since 2001 for the Alpo, and I would love to talk to someone who would like to possibly help me out or even assume the layout responsibilities, the electronic layout responsibilities of the journal.
You've been doing it a long time, but a very good job, I'll say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
by the way, I'm a member of the, well, I joined the Society for Technical Communication, Professional Society, back in 1987, and it was only in the last few years that I decided to enter the journal into one of their competitions, even though it's not business-oriented. And about 2 years ago or so, the journal received a merit award from the Society for Technical Communication for work. So, well, there you go.
Very good. And I've been a member of the Alpo since 1972, and I've seen quite the evolution of the journal.
Yeah.
In all those years. I mean, from what it was back then to what it is now. Plus, now it's also, as you mentioned, available online as a PDF.
Yes.
So, and that version has color pages and all sorts of things in it, and hot links that you can go to. Links to the stories and stuff.
The original journal was on 8.5 by 11 paper. It was mimeographed. If I remember correctly, it was founded primarily to allow enthusiastic lunar and planetary solar system observers to exchange data with each other.
Right.
And possibly get the eye and ear of the professional community. If I recall correctly, I heard that Walter was very frustrated. Now, he was not an astronomer. He was a mathematician, originally from Youngstown, Ohio, and there's a long history to his career, but he wound up finally settling out at Las Cruces, New Mexico. But he was very frustrated with the professional community regarding amateurs as so-so, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
And thus he founded the Alpo, and it was interesting that the amateur community, we're the people who, I get dirty looks from the professionals when I say this. The amateurs, I say, we make the discoveries and the professionals make the announcements. At least
there's a lot of cases where that's true.
That is so true. And so, Walter did the thing. It was monthly at first. Then it came out a little less frequently, maybe semi-monthly, and then quarterly or, whatever. He did it all the way into the 60s. Eventually it went from 8.5 by 11 stapled at the corner to a booklet on an odd-sized paper.
Right.
I don't know why, but it was. And that's the way it stayed. Walter turned it over to Harry Jameson, who was the executive director, and then he also was editor, and then he turned it over to John Westfall at some point, and he did it. And then I've done it, and I turned it into a true quarterly. It comes out at about the change of each of the seasons.
Now, you and Shawn actually give us deadlines to get our articles in.
Yeah. So, people are usually pretty good about that. And then when I took it over, I changed the format completely to 8.5 by 11 in a booklet style, a true, saddle stitch. And now it's not even saddle stitched; it's bound on the spine with you can read, what the issue is and the name, and then also as a PDF. Now, the hard copy is still published, but it's black and white inside pages because we do not have a budget that will allow us to print the full issue in color. But the PDF, of course, like you said, full color throughout with PDF hyperlinks and so forth and so on.
Now, how many do we print on a month on actual?
We're a small player. Our circulation total, let's see, our membership secretary is Matt Will, and we print something in the neighborhood. Well, it's under 400. It's under maybe 300, or maybe it's a lot less. It's a lot less hard copies. That's true, because at least half of the membership gets it electronically only, PDF only. So the number of people who get it by hard copy is going down, but there will always be that because among our distribution are those in public libraries and professional facilities who stock the book.
Okay. Now, one of the reasons we want to sit down and talk right now is because you just released the spring 2021 edition of the journal, and it's larger than normal.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
The journal is usually about equal in the page count to maybe something like Sky and Telescope magazine. But in this issue, we happen to have some very, very professionally written papers by one guy named Darrell Wilson, who did the third in a series of 3 papers on what is called lunar thermal imaging with a specific kind of a electronic camera. It's not your typical CCD camera or webcam. It's a certain device that he describes. So it's probably as expensive as a high-end CCD camera, I'm guessing, but you'd have to see the journal. And like I said, that paper includes techniques and how to interpret the images that you get for getting images that have to do with sensing the color, or which is based on temperature of lunar surfaces during the various times of the lunar month. So that's the best I can explain that. Another paper is by Richard Wilds, who did a thing, simply explained it has to do with grazing occultations, when the moon grazes a planet. And he calls it Luna Cognita, I think is what he calls it. But it gets very technical, and if you're really into planetary occultations, this is the thing to see. This issue also includes some other great papers. We have apparition report on I forgot if it's Saturn or Venus, one or the other, because next month it's going to be the other planet. We have another one of our solar Carrington rotation reports by Rick Hill.
Yes, and Steve Jacques also wrote a real nice article about observational astronomy.
Yeah. One of your most successful, as I know it, students.
They're all successful if they pass.
Well, let's say that Stephen's enthusiasm has wavered.
Yeah, in fact, the previous podcast was actually an encore of one he did with me, I think episode 3.
Yeah.
And it was just so good, I wanted to release it again for all the new people out there.
And, and then other things in the journal include reports what the various observing and interest sections are doing, spotlighting any of their most active members who are really submitting good over-the-top reports or anything like that. So it takes a lot of work, but I believe that it's a very valuable to the membership to see how much work is going on. You've got people out there who like astronomy that kind of go out on the back porch and look up and say, "Oh, very nice," and they go back in the house. And then you got other people who practically live in a field.
Right.
That's all they do.
Right. Well, you actually wrote a point of view article in this issue too that talks about who writes the journal. You do.
Yes.
Because because that's basically it. I mean, you don't write the articles. They get submitted to you, and
that's right.
Do you have limitations to what type of articles people can submit?
Has to be about solar system astronomy, observational astronomy. And it cannot be also printed or published anywhere else. And and if it's reasonably well written, we can use it. And that's the big thing. We are an organization that is dedicated to observational astronomy. And we can talk about Hubble and all the various other orbiting satellites and so forth, but we have members who do work that is comparable to what's out there. As a matter of fact, as we do this podcast at the end of March, yesterday I saw an article CNN.com where there was a paper printed or published in another science journal. I think it's called Planetary Science Journal or something like that. And it had to do with seasons on the planet Saturn. And it included the article included a nice image of Saturn. Okay. And, they talked about the 29 and a half years of Saturn doing this and that and the other. Well, it came across to me as if somebody just discovered that Saturn had seasons. Okay. And we knew this all along. Alpo people knew this all along. The images done by people like Clyde Foster and so forth, who contribute to the Saturn observing section, and Larry Owens, who is another member here who is local to me in Atlanta, their images are probably equal to anything that Hubble does. You get your electronics set right, you get the right sky conditions and the good seeing conditions. You take a look at the journals and you will see. And by the way, let everybody know, you can go out there and view or download all of the journals up until the current year from the Alpo website. So we'll talk about how to get at it later on.
Okay. Yeah. Now, so do you have to be a member to contribute to the journal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Our
membership is so expensive. I mean,
membership is so expensive.
Yes, it's $18 a year.
$18. That $18. And by the way, I think we're less than the AA VSO. We're considerably less than belonging to the AAS. And these are all fine organizations. I'm just talking about our due structure. The American Astronomical Society, the American Association of Variable Star Observers. I know we're less than the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, the ASP. And probably I know that we're even less than membership in the local astronomy club here in Atlanta.
Yeah, we're less than the local one here too. I mean, it's and the $18 membership is that digital version where you get their journal in color with all the links inside of it. And plus you can also join the training program once you do that, and all sorts of other things, benefits that you can have by joining for only $18. So it's quite the bargain, I think.
Yeah. And if you want to get the hard copy, well, the dues is more expensive because you're going to pay for that. And by the way, if you do decide to join and get the hard copy membership, you will also get the PDF file as well. But yeah, you're right. The basic membership for 1 year, 4 issues, is only $18.
Yeah. It's quite the deal.
Worldwide, such a deal.
Yeah, and it's if you want 4 issues of the paper journal, it's I think $45. So
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still a deal. Still worth it. Yeah. All right. So we also have advertisements within the journal.
Yeah, basically those are supporting memberships, you could call it that. On the outside back cover, 1960, we're proud to have Sky and Telescope magazine as the longest supporting advertiser.
Wow.
And that's their ad is always on the outside back cover. And on the inside front cover, we've only had them for, I think, the last year. We're very proud to add Celestron to the inside front cover, full page ad from Celestron. And for the time being, that's it. We will take full page ads, half page ads, quarter page ads. If you're looking to sell equipment, we can always put something in there for you. But there's no way that we could meet our publication costs by just using advertising dollars, or else the whole issue would be advertising, because our rates are so low.
Right. There are a couple quarter page ads sprinkled throughout the thing, but nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing major. Yeah. So you're not getting a typical magazine that you would buy today that's half ads.
No.
That's good. It's great. So that goes in the membership levels we have in the Alpo. We talked about, if you want the journal.
Yeah, membership levels are, as we talked about, and then there are people who do donate a lot of extra money. We have, like any other nonprofit organization, we have sustaining memberships, and I think there's one or two levels above that, depending on how much extra you do donate towards the organization.
Great. Is there anything else you want to talk about in regard to the journal?
Well, I'm working currently on the journal that will be coming out at the very end of May, beginning of June. It's seasonal. And I want to announce, let's make sure everybody knows that it will include, again, a repeat announcement about our upcoming, what I call a conference. We used to call it a convention when everybody went, but I call it a conference, the 2021 Alpo Conference, where science, astronomy papers will be presented. And it's going to be online, so it's going to be just like this, virtual, but it'll be visual as well as audio. And that will be Friday, August 13th and Saturday, August 14th. And again, you do have to be a member to present a paper, but you do not have to be a member to participate as a viewer. And you can participate either through Zoom or you can participate, if I recall correctly, by, you correct me on this, is it by the YouTube channel? The Alpo YouTube channel?
Yeah, the YouTube channel.
Okay. And the hours of presentation will be in the Eastern time zone here from 1 to 5 on both that Friday and Saturday. And we've done it that way so that people who live out where Tim lives, out in California, which are 3 hours earlier, they can participate because it'll be from 10 to 1 California time. And
and there's no charge for attending.
No charge.
All you have to do is contact me, send me an email, and I will put you on the list to be notified of the Zoom link when we set that all up.
Right. And then there will be a board meeting of the executive board of the Alpo. That'll be on, I'm not sure if it'll be Friday evening or Saturday evening.
It's usually Friday night, yeah.
Yeah. And then on Saturday after the board meeting, we'll have a speaker. Now, when we had the event, when it was true people to people and, in person, following the last talk, people would head back to their hotel rooms, change, come back and eat and have dinner in the dining room, which was, provided by the hotel where we were staying. And then after that, we would present some awards. We have a service award, and then we have an observing award. And then this past year, we just started a general, I guess you could call it, astronomy award named for one of our most valued members who passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, the Michael D. Reynolds Astronomy Award for contributions to astronomy in general, for promoting astronomy. So we have 3 awards that we could present, and then that will be followed by a talk, a general talk. It won't be a tech talk. It'll be a talk about astronomy or something like that. So think of it as a dinner. So if you do participate and you're in the Eastern time zone, have dinner in front of your computer screen while the speaker is going at it.
There you go. Works. Yeah. Great. Now, getting back to you for a little bit, do you have tips that you would give someone that was just starting out in astronomy?
A lot of people want to go out and buy a scope, and I hesitate to encourage that. I recommend that people, first of all, go to go to well, when you can do this, okay, get together with a local club when they're having an outside event, an observing event, and look at and look through the scopes that they have. You don't want to go and buy something that you're going to find to be too big and unusable. And then you don't want to find, you don't want to cheap out and buy a $60 telescope that's going to be crap, and it gets used once and it sits in the closet, and you'll never do astronomy again because of that one bad purchase. So the best thing to do is go someplace where they're having an observing event and participate as an interested person. Then you might consider getting a really nice pair of binoculars.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if they're most powerful, you need to put them on a stand or a tripod or something, but get a pair of binoculars to help you get started. You're not going to see a lot of deep sky objects, but you will be able to see good views of the moon, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, but you will get a taste of what you could see with a very good scope. And then later on, after you decide if you want a refractor or a reflector or a Schmidt-Cassegrain or this or that, that comes later. Just like when you buy a car, you don't know what you want to buy until you look at and test drive. And so go at it slow. Don't blow your money.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and there's one thing that I've been hitting on lately too. It's if you buy yourself a telescope, you need to temper your expectations of what things are going to look like through it.
Not in color.
Jupiter's not going to look like a Hubble Space Telescope photo. Right. Saturn's not going to look like that. The moon doesn't look like that.
Right.
The
moon is pretty much black and white.
Right. But part of observing and using a telescope is learning how to observe.
Yes.
And that's one thing I stress in the training program, because we're not only training your hand to make a drawing, but we're training your eyeball to see more detail. And the only way you can do that is time with the telescope.
Let me add this. I'm doing this without permission of Matt Will, but those of you out there listening who would like to learn how to observe, well, Steve, how do you pronounce his name?
Zakis. Yeah.
His article in the brand new journal that was just released a few months ago is really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you have to be a member to get the newest Alpo journal, which we subtitled "The Strolling Astronomer," those of you who are listening that would like to read up on Steve Zakis' article on how to observe, get in touch with Tim Robertson, and we'll make sure that we can get to you a PDF copy of that journal.
Definitely, I can do that. I can definitely do that. And also, like I mentioned, Steve was also in the last podcast talking about the training program and his experiences in it. So it's always a good thing.
We have some coordinators out there. If those of you who listen to this podcast regularly, you'll hear people like Carl Hergenrother, who is the Comets section coordinator. Every time I hear Carl do his thing on the podcast about this comet and that comet, I can't wait to go home and get my stuff set up and observe, but it's cloudy. But Carl is one of the most inspirational speakers. He's not a dull person to listen to. He's very enthusiastic about his interest. And that's just one person in the organization.
Yeah, Bob Lunsford's the same way with the meteor section. He's made me renew my interest in watching meteor showers.
Yes.
So that's very true. Very true.
When you can see things through the smoke from the forest fires, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky right now. We don't have any fires out here. So, astronomy books.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Sky Observer's Guide. What books have you worn out?
I've got a lot of books that I've looked through, too many to mention, but I've got a few good books that I will even now bring out and look at. Excuse me. One is the it's the Lunar Atlas that most people tend to quote or refer to. There's dozens of lunar atlases out there, and I'm sure that some are better than others. But the late Antonin Ruckel did Atlas of the Moon.
I'm looking at it on my bookshelf right now as we're talking.
Right. It came out in the early 90s, and he did a revised edition of it in the late 90s or early 2000s. It was published by Sky and Telescope. I think it's out of print, but to show you how valuable it is now, if you go on Amazon and try to find it, you're looking for a pretty penny. I mean, hundreds of dollars to get one in good condition. It's hardbound, and I'm proud to say that I founded what is called the Peach State Stargaze back in 1994 here in North Georgia. And over the years, I brought in big speakers and grew the event to several hundred people a year. And it was in 2000 that we brought Mr. Ruckel and his wife over to be our featured speaker for that spring. That was when the event was held in the spring 2000 Peach State Stargaze. And people asked him, why did you use red in your maps? In some of your maps, not everything was black, but he had some highlighted stuff in red. Why did you do that? Because when you're using red light, the red disappears. And he said, well, when I observe the moon, I don't worry about using a red light. I use a white light. And then everybody goes, oh, that's right.
Makes sense.
So there's Atlas of the Moon, excuse me. And then I've got other books that I pull out every so often and read. So there was the urban astronomy book by a guy out of Chicago. I think he passed away. There was just a lot of books. I've got the Carl Sagan series, a whole bunch of them. His book on comets, his book on astronomy. I've just a lot of stuff.
Great. Yeah. You are active in your local astronomy club. I believe it's the Charles Elliott Astronomy Club there in Georgia.
Well, we have the Atlanta Astronomy Club.
Okay.
And it meets when we were meeting together. We were meeting at the Fernbank Science Center, and that's in town. That's in the in town of Atlanta, really in the area called Decatur. But there's a group of people who really live pretty far out in the country, and they put together what's called a chapter of the Atlanta Astronomy Club, and it meets at a location called the Charlie Elliott Wildlife Area, and it's about a good 30, 40 miles out southeast of town. And so it's the Charlie Elliott Astronomy Club, and it's a chapter of the Atlanta Astronomy Club. So those are the two clubs. There is another club south of us in a suburb or a town called Griffin, and that's called the Flint River Astronomy Clubs. And I think there are some smaller clubs associated with some of the colleges, but those are the three clubs.
Great. Yeah, I follow the Charles Elliott Club on Facebook, and they are very, very active.
Yes, I don't know when this podcast is. Do you have a publication date for this podcast?
Early April. Yeah.
Well, on April 10th, the Charlie Elliott Club will be again meeting online, and our featured speaker will be Dr. Michelle Fowler, who is one of the subject matter experts that's always on the series called How the Universe Works, which is carried on the Science Channel on cable TV.
Oh, wow.
We've had Will Terrian from the Netherlands.
Yeah, I was online for that one. That was a great discussion on star atlases.
And I had him at the 2002 Peach State Stargaze. We brought him in from the Netherlands. We had Don Mackholt, who is another Alpo person, who is a very, very noted. He's up there with David Levy on comet discoveries and so forth. So April 10th, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. If you're interested, get in touch with Tim, and we'll get you the information on how to log in.
Yeah, that's available on the Charles Elliott Facebook page, right?
Facebook page, on the Charlie Elliott Facebook page, Charlie Elliott Astronomy Facebook page. The Charlie Elliott has a blog page online is at CE Astronomy. That's one word, no dots. ceastronomy.org. And
Great.
poke around there, and you'll see the full write-up about what's going on for the most part.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before I let you go?
Join and enjoy.
Thank you. Well, Ken, once again, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure.
All right. You take care and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I again want to thank Ken Poshedly for coming on the podcast today and talking about the journal. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook every few weeks. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please rate and review us. I really appreciate it. And you can now listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, Soundcloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, and Amazon Echo. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon by giving up to $35 a month, where you'll receive 1 year's membership to the Alpo and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I want to thank the producers of this podcast, Steve Seidentop and Michael Moyer, for their generous support of the Observer's Notebook. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the Alpo, is available in the show notes. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me at cometman@cometman.net or on Twitter at ObserversNBpod. And until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening and stay healthy.